Immersive sims are tricky. They're tricky to explain because each immersive sim is unique unto itself in a way, so a consistent cohesion between games can be difficult to find. They're tricky to sell because they often require a lot of investment from the player in both time and energy, especially rare commodities considering the current global climate. They're tricky to play because of the difficulty involved with the requirement demanded of the player. All in all, the term easy is not usually associated with these kinds of games, but that's what makes them worthwhile. This confidence to force the player to make difficult choices, to provide sometimes frustrating challenges that demand more of you. Immersive sims have provided me some of the most memorable gaming experiences I've ever had. The trickiness to explain means that no two titles are exactly the same, leading to new and exciting experiences. The trickiness to sell means that it won't be another vapid, lifeless slog which requires only a few button inputs here and there for a few hours, an all too familiar feeling in the current video game landscape. And the trickiness to play leads to challenges that can be overcome with imaginative problem solving and not just an easy A or B choice structure. In a world where social media encourages a lack of enthusiasm and effort, where homogenization is flooding the global consciousness, it's refreshing to be confronted with an experience that encourages your uniqueness, that pushes you to challenge yourself in your own imagination. Although immersive sims have been waning in popularity for a long time, we need them now more than ever. But before I go on to tell you why, we first need to set some ground rules by defining immersive sims. And right off the bat, we run into a bit of an issue. Quite a lot of online discourse seems to suggest that the immersive sim genre isn't really a genre at all, and is instead a set of gameplay elements that can be adopted. Speaking with NoClip's Danny O'Dwyer about the game Prey in 2021, Rafael Colantonio had this to say about immersive sims.
Immersive sim is more than a genre, it's more like a set of values, or if you think about it. It's almost like there's a continuum. It's almost like there's a landscape of, you can pull some sliders, like how much of an RPG is it versus how much of a, direct action game is it?
For example, the defining factor of an immersive sim is the ability to complete an objective in multiple different ways. And that's such a broad definition that so many different types of games fit into that criteria. It's a lot more complicated than this, of course, but if we were to isolate the genre to this one defining factor, then BioShock, Citizen Sleeper, and Baldur's Gate 3, all wildly different games, would technically fit the bill. As a result, I'd rather focus on 3 classic immersive sims and discuss not only what makes them immersive sims, but also how they all utilize elements of the immersive sim to craft their own unique worlds and forms of storytelling. I don't think there's a better place to start than with the original System Shock. I know for this video I'm playing the remake, but from what I've read online, it's essentially a graphical update of the original with only minor changes, so I think it's okay. But this game puts the immersive in immersive sim. The art style is incredible. It's such a claustrophobic and intense experience. Wandering around these labyrinthine corridors, waiting for a mutant or cyborg to jump out at any moment. The endless wires and neon light buttons scattered everywhere makes you feel like you're trapped in this endless nightmare maze. It's incredible. Funnily enough, there's even a meta reason why the station is built this way. You can definitely see where games like BioShock and Dead Space got their inspiration, because this is just steeped in atmosphere. This is also where we get our first glimpses of a staple of immersive sims, which is choice. Now it's done in a very minor way here, I'll be getting into choice later on, but System Shock is a management game through and through. You can recycle items for credits by either recycling them directly or vaporizing them into cubes. Some items are worth nothing when you recycle them directly, so they need to be vaporized to be recycled for credits. However, some items are worth more credits when recycled directly, and this is where the choice comes in. Vaporized cubes only take up 1 block in your inventory, whereas items that have inherent value typically take up much more space. So you can either take up space in your inventory where other essential items might need to go just so you can get more credits, or you can vaporize the item in question, making it worth roughly half of what it would have been before, whilst making space for more important items to go. And credits are an important resource. You need ammo and medkits throughout the game, otherwise you're gonna struggle big time. So this can be a tough decision to make, particularly just before difficult areas or boss fights. This game is less interested in the player making significant choices that affect the narrative, and much more interested in allowing the player to micromanage their experience, focusing on the player's agency on gameplay rather than story. Through this, you create a kind of build without ever touching a skill tree. If you want a more melee focus, you can stock up on melee weapons and Berserk, and if you prefer ranged combat, you can stock up on weapons and ammo, or you can do a bit of both. There's a decent enough variety in the weapons so that you're really able to indulge in your kind of playstyle. Sure, some weapons are more powerful than others, but there's never a point where you feel stuck if you've focused on a certain kind of weapon or resource over another. For example, with the Diego fights, yes, there are 2 of them and they're both a pain in my ass. There's no one way to take him down. You can really pick whichever one works for you. That being said, I would recommend using the alternative ammo types of the assault rifle. They're pretty good. Actually, look, I need to talk about this boss fight for a second. The spoilers ahead, I'm going completely off script. Oh my god, I spent so long on both of these. I don't even know which one I could say is worse than the other. I want to say actually that the first one is harder than the second. They're both pretty hard, but at least in the second one, he's like so much slower. Whereas in the first one, he will attack you. Like, he will sprint at you. He'll do his whole thing. He'll swing. He teleports. Oh man, it's so annoying. He one hits you easily, and you can kind of, at a certain point, you can like kind of telegraph his attacks a little bit, so you can kind of tell what he's going to do ahead of time. But it's like he hits like an absolute brick. Oh my god, every single attack that he does, it's like, it doesn't matter if you like have a ton of like med packs or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. He hits you twice and you're dead, basically, unless it's under certain circumstances, of course. But oh my god, that first one was so annoying. I was just there raging at this, and I came back to it eventually. Like, I tried a number of times and I couldn't do it, so I went away and I came back, and I found like the best kind of method that I found. But oh my god, that was such a pain. And then like I so obviously took him out, and I was ecstatic. I was so happy that it was finally done. And then later on, it turns out that he kind of just teleported away after the first fight, and he teleports back when you're in security, I think, and then you have to fight him again. Oh my god, that one was bad. That one's really bad because again, he hits really hard, but he's a lot slower. So I that one I didn't mind as much, but that was still painful. That was still really bad. I tried using the like electro gun. I'm forgetting all the names of the weapons, by the way. I tried using the electro gun thing for like the longest time, and oh my god, I'm forgetting. Oh my god, yeah, because in the second fight you take him out, and then like 3 other really powerful enemies spawn, and you have like no time to react. You if you run out of med packs, then like sucks to suck. And I think it was twice, maybe 3 times where I actually took him out, and then I was so excited, and then I got taken out by one of the 3 other enemies afterwards. And oh my god, I like, just thinking about it now, stressing me out. That was such, that boss fight was so annoying. Oh my god. And you see, now that I'm thinking about it, I actually think the second one was worse. Now that I'm talking it through, I think the second one might have been worse than the first. Literally just because of the 3 enemies afterwards. Because also you can't leave the room, like you can't run away. Like, you have to take out everyone in that room, and when they spawn in afterwards, you have like no ammo, you have no health, you have nothing, and they can like one-shot you as well. I think I remember like melee attacking the 2 ones that are by the door, like slowly taking down the bigger guy afterwards. Oh man, what a pain. And there was pillars that explode as well, so you can't like stand by those. You always have to be on the move, but you can't be too close because then he'll hit you. You can't be too far away because then he'll shoot missiles at you. You can't be close enough to the pillars because he'll just shoot the pillars and they'll explode. Oh my god, that was so annoying. Anyway, ramble over. I'm gonna go back to the script. You have to prioritize both what you think would be the most effective way to take out enemies, and also what you find the most fun. The minimalist mission objectives make the game even more immersive. You don't have a mission tab or mission markers, you have to uncover the mystery yourself through audio logs, messages, and things that happen on the station. There are some very obvious signs pointing you in the right direction, but there are much less obvious ones too, like the call for the radiation shield. This makes you feel even more alone and isolated. No one's coming to help you, you have to figure everything out on your own, and the game does an amazing job at emphasizing this. Using this kind of minimalist style of mission objectives leads to some small but very satisfying moments of environmental storytelling, where you find a crewmate dead in a small passageway or an event somewhere, and their last log is about how they died trying to fight the enemy that you just killed. Or, better yet, It's a warning for an upcoming section where they describe what got them in the end, so that you can do your best to avoid or overcome it. And in a more indirect way, the structure of the station acts as a great narrative device too. The enemies early on in the game are these monstrous mutants transformed by Shodan, and as you get closer and closer to the feral AI, the enemies become much tougher and, more importantly, much more mechanical. These are the bots that were safeguarding the execs and the higher-ups at the station, whereas only really basic bots and low-level personnel resided on the first few levels. I really like this kind of natural world building. Everything about the ship functions in a way that makes complete sense. Compared to other, more intense immersive sims, the freedom of choice here is pretty limited. You still have to follow pretty strict mission guidelines to complete objectives, such as reducing the security level in a section by shooting out cameras and/or destroying CPU nodes. You don't really get the option to fully sneak by enemies throughout the whole game because certain sections require you to enter combat full on, plus your abilities point towards agility in combat more than anything resembling stealth. You also don't really choose what abilities you have, only when to use them, and you actually need to acquire certain abilities like the hazard protection to get to one of the groves later on in the game. For all of these reasons, I think it's pretty fair to call System Shock a light immersive sim. It has what other games that came after it do better. I don't mean for this to be an insult at all. There's a reason System Shock is a classic. Hell, most of the games that I would consider to be in my top 20 wouldn't even exist without System Shock, so a lot is owed to it for sure. What I mean is that it set the benchmark for other games to improve upon its premise, and one of those games is Deus Ex.
You alright, Mr. Renton?
It's one of the greatest games of all time for a reason. Everything from its gameplay to its soundtrack, enemy design and level structure, it's all so meticulous and expertly crafted. What System Shock lacks, Deus Ex makes up for in spades, especially when it comes to choice. The devs designed each level so that the player had a number of different options every single time. For example, during the second mission where you have to infiltrate an NSF base to find a barrel of ambrosia, you can follow Anna to the front entrance and gun down the enemies by the kiosk, which leads to the underground entrance. Or, the moment that you arrive, you can talk to this child and offer him food, after which he'll tell you about a secret entrance to the exact same base, which can be found just behind the soda machine you walk past. The game actively encourages you to search around each level to find items and information that you can use to your advantage. That way, you never really feel railroaded into making only one or two decisions. The only real limitation here is your imagination and willingness to explore and experiment. Most games don't even provide a choice as to how the objective is completed. Even when they do, it usually boils down to either guns blazing or stealth, with the main objective still being to take out all the enemies in the area. And even if this is the case, both options are relatively easy to accommodate for the player's preference. If they made combat hard and stealth easy, then the player would only ever pick the easy option. Making both options hard is also a risk, because players might just get turned off and walk away from the game, which is disastrous for a studio that wants to make an easily accessible game for a mainstream audience. But immersive sims aren't really for mainstream audiences, so Deus Ex takes this exact approach by making both action and stealth challenging. You have to wait for the reticle to center to shoot someone while getting shot at, and trying to sneak around without getting caught can be really inconsistent. But that's the point, you have to get better as you go. You have to learn how to properly use the stun prod or the crossbow. You have to be patient and learn how to use distractions. By the same token, you have to know when and how to use certain weapons and gadgets to be the most effective during combat. The freedom in immersive sims isn't about providing a really easy option for the player to coast through the game with. It's about allowing the player to choose a challenging path and then learn how to go down that path properly. On paper, this is a really amazing idea, and I think for the most part, Deus Ex achieves this really well. My only problem with this is in regards to stealth.
There were some folks there who said, what percentage of players are going to sneak in this game? It's kind of a silly question, but I just said, I don't know, 30%? And other people are going to play it like a shooter. And they said, if only 30% of players are going to sneak, why are you spending a dime and any time on stealth? My response was, that's the whole point of the game.
I completely agree with what he's saying here, but I think they made stealth so hard that I don't even think 30% of the player base tried stealth. It just feels so random at times. You don't really know if and when an enemy is going to spot you. Sometimes the sleep dart works immediately, sometimes it takes a second to kick in. For the stun prod, sometimes you have to hit them 2 or even 3 times for it to work. It's easy to get better at combat because it's not as reliant on conditions as stealth is. I would say that combat and stealth have the same kind of randomness, especially towards the beginning of the game because you're not that skilled and have next to no augmentations. But combat has no requirements, whereas the main requirement for stealth is remaining unseen or at the very least not raising an alarm. You could sneak through half an enemy base, but the moment a sniper from across the map notices a pixel of your right eyebrow, they'll start shooting and set off the alarm and suddenly stealth over. Now either enter combat mode or reload the save to start again with no guarantee that it'll work on the next try. Even when you do get stealth augmentations later on in the game, they cost so much energy to use and there's no guarantee that they'll even work. Stealth never felt like an option at any point during the game. So I get what Warren Spector is saying, and I agree that it's about giving the player the option to choose any path they want, no matter how unlikely it is that the player is going to pick that path or playstyle. But I think they made stealth so difficult to do that combat felt like the only option every single time, no matter how hard it got during certain parts of the game. It's important to give the player this option regardless of its difficulty. It's all about freedom and choice. A really crucial part of this formula is sacrifice. It forces you to commit a choice once it's been chosen. In System Shock, there really isn't that much sacrifice in your choices besides maybe one weapon and some credits here and there. In Deus Ex, it's much more in-depth. For example, augmentation canisters have one of 2 options, and you can only pick one without ever being able to see the effects of the other. This limitation breeds creativity, because once you're met with a challenge that requires the augmentation that you skipped out on, you now have to find an alternate path to accomplish the objective. Again, this isn't to punish the player, but it's to make the player's choices meaningful. Your choice would be meaningless if the consequences of it were exactly the same as those of another choice. Consequently, your choices are that much more impactful, and not just another option among countless other options at your disposal. Instead of providing you with a million different skills to tackle a million different challenges, it provides you with a handful of skills to tackle a certain amount of challenges, and the rest of the time you have to use your own creativity. These games teach you that you provide more skills to the game than the game provides for you. I can't think of many other genres that give the player the same feeling. Not only does Deus Ex expand the range of choices that the player has compared to System Shock, but it also expands the immersion too, through the way that it depicts the world. Random NPCs will have conversations about the current global conflict or about the last mission that you were on. And I love how you can miss some of these conversations if you're not actively exploring an area. At Unatco HQ, my primary objective was to talk to someone in the lounge area, but me being me, I completely forgot where this was. And in trying to find my bearings, I stumbled into this office where 2 Unatco troopers were talking about my brother, his betrayal, and whether he was justified in joining the NSF.
I think Paul just had a soft spot for the plague victims. Every human institution is like a pyramid. Those with ability are at the top. They're more important.
Maybe it's the foundation that's important. When the foundation's gone.
This is in a random office nowhere near the lounge, and if I hadn't happened to clumsily stroll in here, I would have missed out on what turned out to be one of my favorite NPC conversations in the game. And sometimes, these conversations can really help you. When I went to the Tun Hotel for the second time, the owner and his daughter were having a heated argument about Jojo, a gangster who deals in some unsavory business who's staying at the hotel. Again, if I hadn't come around this corner to explore, I would have fully missed this conversation, and so I wanted to lend a hand now that I knew what was going on. Off to kill Jojo.
Oh, you bad. Keep out of the way.
You saved my life.
Well, that was quick. It also has a very similar kind of micromanagement in relation to System Shock. At a certain point, I came across the Gep gun, and considering how much I'd struggled against tough enemies before, I thought now would be the perfect opportunity to get it in case I needed it for a really tough battle in the future. But this thing takes up a ton of inventory space, and so I got rid of the shotgun, which I used pretty frequently, and left the mission wondering if I'd made the right call. Deus Ex understands that some of the most meaningful choices exist here in these smaller moments, whether you're sacrificing one weapon for another in your inventory, or deciding between 2 augmentations, or you're picking which skills to dedicate your points to. These are what make your character. They're what properly craft your experience with the game. The biggest criticism I have of Deus Ex though, is that the world doesn't really feel that reactive to your larger actions. It only feels reactive to your smaller ones. This is a story where the fate of the world is in your hands, yet the only really meaningful decisions that you make happen at the very end of the game. You can play through the main game literally however you want. It doesn't affect the endings at all. Now, ignoring the fact that this is an immersive sim for a second, I actually don't mind endings like these because I feel like I'm basing my decision on everything that I've learned about the world rather than my actions over the course of the game. So it doesn't really feel like an arbitrary call, but instead quite an informed one. After 22 hours, you understand the socio-political state of the world quite well and just how messed up it is. But for a game that's all about giving the player significant choices to make, the most important narrative beats are unaffected by your decisions throughout the game. So a quick thing before I talk about the endings. I recorded the entirety of my 22-hour playthrough of Deus Ex. When I went to import this footage into Premiere Pro, I got the classic, "We are unable to open file on disk." But I've run into this issue before, and usually I just change the file name or location and there we go, but it didn't work this time. In fact, none of the solutions I looked up worked at all. So the reason why you're watching footage from the first 8-ish hours of Deus Ex is because I literally can't use the other 14 hours I recorded for reasons I'm still not too sure about. I'm still going to talk about the endings for sure, but you won't be seeing any footage of that from me, I'm afraid. So here's some extra footage from what I was able to import, and you'll just have to use your vivid imagination to visualize the end of the game. The last mission does so much heavy lifting to contextualize the multiple endings that you can choose, instead of having these choices evolve throughout the course of the game. You work with the Illuminati for a bit, and then in the last mission, this guy's like, "Hey, do you want to rule the world together? How does that sound?" Meanwhile, Tracer Tong is like, "I want to send the world back to the Dark Ages and you're going to help me do it." As if that wasn't bad enough, you then have an AI who's like, "Merge with me and we may rule the earth as its benevolent deity." None of these philosophies are outlined in any of the previous levels, so if anything, the one that makes the most narrative sense is the Illuminati. Because hey, ruling the world is kind of their thing, so why not keep the ball rolling, right? But with Tracer's ending, there's no guarantee that the world wouldn't be ruled by a totalitarian Big Brother organization either. So that's why I picked the AI ending, because at the very least, it suggests a different outcome. Either the Illuminati regains power, or you revert humanity back to the Dark Ages, where there's no guarantee that the situation that we find ourselves in by the end of the game won't happen again. So I picked the option that I found avoided this scenario as much as possible. But this is an immersive sim, and although I was very much immersed in the world, none of the decisions you make in the game affect the availability of these final choices. Imagine how much more interesting it would have been had one or more of the options been blocked because of certain decisions that you've made earlier in the story. Or, if the devs didn't want to completely prevent the player from experiencing an ending, what if your actions slightly changed one of the final choices? But even on a smaller scale, your actions changed nothing in the narrative prior to Area 51 anyway. The most you're gonna get is an NPC commenting on recent events and how you handled them. Hell, when I went into the women's bathroom at Yunako HQ, for research purposes, I swear I'm not weird, Mandalay reprimanded me for doing so.
By the way, Denton, stay out of the ladies' restroom. That kind of activity embarrasses the agency more than it does you.
It's great to see characters reacting like this, but I kind of wish that my major actions throughout the game had an impact on the narrative. For example, during the first fight with Simons, I died immediately. I tried again and I died again. And then on the third try, I thought, well, why don't I just run away? Can I just do that? And so I did. I didn't even fight him. I ran away and the level ended. And I thought, oh, that's so cool. You're given the option to either fight him and beat him eventually, or simply run away. You're given that choice. And I thought, oh, this might have such an interesting impact on the story, except it doesn't. You just fight him later anyway. I found this to be a really disappointing part of the game, where I thought your actions could really have consequences later on. But no, you just have to fight the same person anyway. No mission is affected by the actions of the previous mission, even when you revisit locations that were featured prominently in previous events. You can affect how an objective is completed, but the result is exactly the same no matter what. Overall, there is a lot of choice and freedom in Deus Ex. I just wish that my more important choices had more of an impact. The same can't be said, however, for what I would consider to be not only one of the best immersive sims, but simply one of the best games ever made.
Corvo.
Find Emily. Protect her.
Yes, he's killed the Empress.
Your life has taken a turn, has it not? They call her Granny Rags.
They'll go away again if they know what's good for them. I knew you wouldn't disappoint me.
Get in here!
You did it. We must act fast. That's it.
The Lord Regent's done.
For Dunwall and the Empire.
Yes, sir. I believe Corvo has breathed his last. Just as you wanted.
But I only gave you half the poison, Corvo.
And I know what it felt like to shove a blade into your Empress.
What a fine help you've been.
Strange how there's always a little more innocence left to lose.
Back to the house!
She will remember you were there, Corvo.
I love this game so much. The world is this incredible alternate 1800s London-inspired industrial hellhole with a beautiful art style. The level of care and detail that Arcane put into this game is just astonishing. Towards the end of the first mission, your objective is simply to get back to Samuel and finish the mission. But so much is packed into this tiny area, it's insane. If you help this couple get away from the guards, they'll tell you about a combination to a safe located in the bunkhouse. If you're trying the sneaky or pacifist option, then maybe you snuck past all the way to the mess hall, where you can find a note giving you the same information. And if you decided to explore the armory area, you can find a valve with a note about the locked building it's supposed to open. But if you didn't explore the armory area and came across the locked building anyway, there's another entrance on the other side through a hidden window. This is the kind of exploration that I love, where different playstyles are rewarded so that the player isn't being punished for picking a different option. Dishonored also has one of the most memorable systems of consequence in any immersive sim, that being the chaos system, wherein your level of violence actively changes the world. If you choose to be uber violent, gunning and stabbing as you please, the world becomes more chaotic. There are more guards in levels, more diseased NPCs wandering around. It feels less like a punishment and more like a natural consequence of your actions. In a world with an increasing amount of violence, wouldn't an increasing amount of authoritarian security and chaotic violence follow? You don't just feel like a random player on a scripted roller coaster passing by pretty landscapes. You really feel like you're actively participating in it. I think this is an amazing element of the game. I just wish that this level of consequence existed on smaller levels as well. Speccing into movement and open violence grants you the same outcomes as speccing into stealth, so your choices feel less impactful. If you take Overseer Campbell, the first target in the game, as an example, you can either kill him or brand him to have him exiled. Neither option is locked behind a certain spec, which makes sense. I understand why they wouldn't want to gatekeep major decisions from players, especially this early on in the game, but I think it would have encouraged replayability by having important decisions like this be restricted depending on how you've chosen to play. For example, what if you had massacred the guards outside the building and, as a result, Campbell cancelled his meeting with the other overseer and instead hid in a panic room, making it virtually impossible for you to brand him. Again, it's not a punishment, but it's a natural consequence of your actions, and it makes you think, oh, what if during my next playthrough I decide to be stealthy instead to see what else could happen? What the game does do, however, is it rewards you for paying attention. If you take your time and look around the levels, you can find mini objectives that can really help you out without the game having to outright tell you what to do. When kidnapping Sokolov, which itself adds a fun twist on the usual assassinating, there's an elevator that can only be powered by a whale oil canister. You have to look around his lab, find the empty tank dispenser, fill it up and then place it in the slot to power the elevator. Even though this is an intentional mechanic put in by the devs, it's so naturally done that it feels like you put in all of the work yourself. There are also these similar moments that are reactive in interesting ways. In the Boyle mansion, a man comes up to you and fully admits that he knows why you're there. He asks you to, instead of kill Lady Boyle, bring her to him in the basement unharmed so that they can run away together because they're in love or whatever. Because I was enjoying my psycho run of the game, I instead killed all three sisters and, in exploring the rest of the mansion, I eventually came across him in the basement area ready to go.
Where is she? Hurry and bring her to me.
Out of curiosity, I brought her body to him to see how he would react.
She's dead? You monster! Oh, my dead love!
I can't say they didn't have it coming, filth.
Wait. What did he say again?
It was really cool to see the game account for my actions, and it goes to show just how much the devs cared about crafting an experience in which the player really feels like the main character. If you go around killing every target, there are wanted posters around future levels demanding you arrest or execution. Even before you enter the Boyle mansion, guards think your costume is in bad taste considering the recent massacres that Corvo has gleefully participated in.
Look at that mask. Sick bastard.
Dishonored foregoes the resource management of Deus Ex and System Shock in favor of creative gameplay decisions. It's not as much about considering the resources you need versus those you've already spent, and more about giving you the tools to explore levels and complete objectives as you see fit. It takes a different approach to Deus Ex in this regard, in that Ion Storm encouraged creativity by limiting the player's supplies, and therefore the significance of the player's choices exist within the tools that they use to play the game, whereas Arcane chose to encourage creativity in gameplay style and how it affects the world at large. This is what makes Dishonored a more marketable game. Resource management is not a very sellable mechanic, but stylistic stealth and supernatural powers definitely are. It's a much more accessible game compared to System Shock and Deus Ex. And I also think that it perfects the element of immersive sims that I find to be the most valuable, that being the consequences of your choices. You see these consequences in the world around you, in each mission, in the ways that characters interact with you. Not only is there a practicality to the game's reactivity, but it invokes an emotional response in me too. Yeah, I killed Lady Boyle and she was an adversary in my path, but witnessing a man grieve over the woman he loves really sucks. I've mowed through plenty of guards, yet in the Steam area of the Golden Cat, you can overhear a conversation between a guard and one of the women at the Golden Cat, wherein he briefly mentions his traumatic past. And suddenly I feel pretty awful about murdering the other guards. These people have lives. They're affected by your actions. They're not emotionless NPCs that couldn't care less about what you do. And no other part of the game exemplifies this as much as the final mission. If you decide on a high chaos playthrough, this cutscene happens as you approach the lighthouse to confront Havelock.
So the Admiral's power mad, Martin's a snake, and Lord Pendleton is a coward. And you, Corvo, the things you've done, you could be the worst of us. I've seen a lot traveling with you. Now get off my boat. I'd wish you good luck, but I'd be lying. Out, Corvo. I don't like what you've become. No better than these traitors. That's why I'm gonna tell them you're coming.
There's no other way to put it. This sucks. Samuel has had your back through everything, not only taking you place to place, but also saving you when you were betrayed. But he's right here. You're a monster. You massacred everyone you came across, showing mercy to no one. You were having fun while those around you were suffering, so now you have to engage in open combat the moment you get to the island. In order to survive, you may have to kill even more people. You make it all the way to the lighthouse. You have a pretty insane shootout. You fail to save Emily the first time, so you reload a save and then you save Emily. But even when you do, the final cutscene is brutal. It basically says that, thanks to you, everything is worse.
What will history tell us? That the daughter of a murdered empress ascended the throne up a mountain of corpses, carried by an assassin named Corvo?
That's what makes Dishonored stand out to me. Your choices matter, and the game makes this very clear from the off. In a 2017 GDC presentation, Arcane's Steve Lee talks about game design in relation to Dishonored and its sequel. I'd recommend watching the whole talk, it's fascinating, but there's one part in particular I want to focus on.
The point number 2 was that we should always be world building. You know, like try not to see it as something where you kind of off the critical path, you have like a small little room with some world building stuff, and then you go back to the gameplay where you're shooting monsters. Like if you can try and approach every idea in your level as an opportunity to build the world. You know, every NPC you place or you can talk to, every objective or side quest, every kind of piece of loot that you place in a meaningful position could be, you know, can develop the world in some way. So try and look at all of these things as opportunities.
All 3 games that I've talked about do this in their own unique ways. System Shock has its audio logs and environmental storytelling, and Deus Ex has NPC interactions and books that you can find in the environment that evolve the world in interesting ways, which is also used by Dishonored 2. But there's something in particular that Steve Lee mentions in his talk that I want to pay particular attention to.
The third point is about world building, particularly in this kind of game, maybe not for all kinds of games. But it's good to be, if your world building says things about the people in the world. World building is a form of storytelling, and stories are always about people.
In other games, the world building revolves quite heavily around exposition, or maybe it's restricted to dialogue between characters. But in immersive sims, the world building is also about the people in these worlds. It's all well and good to outline Whale Oil and its importance in Dishonored, or Silhouette and its relationship with the French government in Deus Ex. But how are regular people affected by this? What about those in authoritative positions? Exploring these questions is what makes immersive sims actually immersive. The conversation between the guards at UNATCO HQ, a soldier detailing his trauma in the steam room, an audio log from an executive worried about the current state of the ship and the internal politics of the company. This is what makes these worlds believable and lived in. I realize I'm showing my bias to Dishonored quite heavily here, but I want to make a few things clear. I enjoyed playing Deus Ex and System Shock 2. I simply prefer Dishonored. But more importantly, all three of these games are trying to do something different, and I think they all achieve exactly what they set out to do. And the one thing these games have in common is immersion. And I don't mean immersion just with the story or with the characters, but with the game itself. With the mechanics, with the structure, with the freedom. You're encouraged to engage with every single mechanic, with all of these different combinations of systems to find another way through or around. But what they also achieve is something that I don't feel like is discussed nearly as much as it should be. It makes games fun. We're living in a time where everyone is obsessed with graphics and performance and player attention, but very rarely is a game's fun factor taken into consideration. Immersive sims speak to the player's childlike imagination, allowing you to mix and match and experiment and mess around with the world. It presents you with the scenario, the limitations of the scenario, and then lets you go all out. In a time when games can feel exceptionally void and lifeless, I think immersive sims offer a refreshing alternative. And I'm not even just talking about the classics like Deus Ex and System Shock, but also Dishonored, Prey, and newer entries like Cruelty Squad. Even though I hated playing that game, it's a miserable experience. They're games that demand more of you and that are far more fulfilling as a result. I watched a lot of interviews and presentations for this video, and in each one I kept finding a tonal similarity that bound them together. From Stephen Kick's no-clip interview in 2020, he's the founder of Night Dive Studios who developed and published the System Shock remake, where he outlined the difficulty that the team had with bringing the classic title to modern audiences, to Rafael Conantonio talking about his disappointment with regards to Prey's commercial failure, to Warren Spector's pretty admirable stubbornness. This level of effort and enthusiasm is what makes me care about immersive sims. The love and care from a development team that we see here is hard to come by nowadays, so when it does happen, it should be cherished and celebrated. So go and try an immersive sim, and maybe it'll change your perspective on what games can be. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.